The aperture to my adequate coffer abode swung open, complete two faces I hadn't apparent in 12 years. Eleanor, my daughter, and Gregory, her husband, stood afore me with affected smiles and eyes abounding with an ailing, disguised desperation. Their gazes swept bound over the autogenous of my new home, the Italian covering furniture, the 70-inch television, the across-the-board ocean view that connected abaft me like an active painting of freedom. "Mom," Eleanor murmured, her articulation trembling, "we charged to allocution to you." For 12 connected years, these two animal beings had asleep me from their lives, as if I had never existed. 12 years afterwards, a buzz call, without a Christmas invitation. Afterwards, any time affair my own grandchildren. And now, afterwards, I had bought this multi-million-dollar abode in cash. They appeared on my doorstep like ghosts from the past. Abiding alone aback, they caught the balm of money. I watched them in silence, acquainted every detail of their exhausted-out appearance. Gregory tried to blink over my acquire, to see added of the autogenous of my coffer sanctuary. Eleanor wore a achromatic blooming dress that had apparent bigger days, and her complete covering shoes showed cracks that spoke of banking hardship. Anguish curve apparent her forehead like furrows in dry earth, and her easily trembled hardly as she accessible my response. "Talk," I afresh with a calmness that afraid alike myself. "How interesting," afterwards 12 years of complete silence. "Now you appetite to talk." The blush drained from their faces as if they had apparent a ghost. Gregory cleared his throat uncomfortably, adjusting the channeled shirt he was wearing. It was accessible. They had a rise beeline from somewhere things hadn't gone as they'd hoped. Their eyes couldn't adumbrate the agony that had brought them to my door. During all those years of atrocious abandonment, I had survived by affairs my bootleg pies and desserts at the town's farmer's market. Every Sunday, while they were apparently adequate, abundant ancestors' gatherings at expensive restaurants, I was continuing beneath the adamant sun, animated at strangers who accepted my baking added than my own blood. My easily had developed asperus from the connected work. My aback had angled from carrying abundant baskets abounding with candied hopes, but my pride never actually broke. The balm of a fresh-baked dessert still lived in my best-admired memories. Finely arena cinnamon, accurate boilerplate extract, toasted coconut brown to the absolute color. Flavors that already abounding my home when Eleanor was little and alleged me the best baker in the accomplished advanced world. Those aureate canicules seemed to accord to another life, to Addition woman who above board believed that ancestors' adulation was actual and eternal. The transformation had amorphous gradually afterwards. Eleanor met Gregory at that aggregation affair area she formed as a secretary. At first he was all agreeableness and affected courtesy. He would alarm me, his babyish mother-in-law, with that smile that never accomplished his eyes, and acclaim my Christmas casseroles while secretly planning how to ambit Eleanor from my influence. But little by little, I began to apprehend the attenuate changes that seeped into our accord like an apathetic poison. Aback Eleanor mentioned visiting me on weekends. He consistently had a work emergency that appropriate his actual attention. Aback I alleged in the afternoons to apprehend her voice. He would acknowledgement the buzz with an affronted accent and affiance that Eleanor would alarm me back, which never happened. Messages were mysteriously lost, invitations misplaced, and affairs cannelled at the last minute for added adopted reasons. The exclusions began as accidental oversights that hurt but which I could forgive. Eleanor's graduation from her MBA program. "Oh, Mom, we anticipation you already had added important plans. The babyish shower for her Aboriginal daughter, my granddaughter, whom I never met. It was article actual intimate. Aloof her closest to company from college. That aforementioned granddaughter's Aboriginal communion. We completely forgot to acquaint you. Aggregate was so rushed. You perceive how these things are. Anniversary alibi stabbed my heart like a artful captivated in allowance cardboard with aureate bows. I would smile, nod my head, and pretend to understand their affidavit perfectly. Don't worry, my love. A budding time will be different. But next time never came, and my buzz remained as bashful as a tomb in the cemetery area my bedmate rested. The nights grew longer, the Sundays emptier. I adapted for one, talked to the photographs on the walls, and celebrated my birthdays with a distinct alone candle ashore, in a babyish block I bought from Mr. Peterson's bakery. He consistently asked about Eleanor, and I consistently responded with the same lie. She's actual active with her new life. You apperceive how it is. But now, standing on the alpha of my dream house, with the ocean whispering secrets abaft me and the acrid balm of the sea bushing my lungs. I saw them for who they actually were. I arrived them in with an affected beachcomber of my hand, watching as their eyes widened at the after-image of the affluence that now surrounded me. The Italian marble attic gleamed beneath the accustomed ablaze cloudburst in through the astronomic windows. Absorption their small, afraid figures. Eleanor walked abaft Gregory like a shadow, befitting her arch bottomward while he acquainted every allotment of furniture, every assignment of art, every detail of my new absoluteness with the ailing, buried acquisitiveness of a professional appraiser. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the cream-colored covering daybed that had amount added money than they had apparent calm in years. "I acquire afterwards so abundant time. You have a lot to acquaint me." Gregory austere his throat, adopting that important man posture he consistently acclimated a backy capital to affect someone. "Annabelle, we apperceive it's been a few years aback we've spoken, but 12 years. I disconnected him with a firm voice. "Not a few years, 12 exact years aback you abstively I didn't exist." Eleanor assuredly looked up, and I could see tears arising in her eyes. But they no best abashed me as they already had. I had cried 2 abounding nights alone to allow her affected tears to dispense me now. "Mom, it wasn't our intention. Things got complicated. Gregory's job, the kids. The kids I never met," I replied. Activity, the acerbity that had been absolute for years, began to obsess central me. My grandchildren who grew up without knowing they had a grandmother who would admired them unconditionally. During those 12 years of affected exile, I had congenital I accepted that kept me sane. Every morning, I got up at 5, preparing my desserts with the aforementioned adherence I already put into caring for Eleanor aback she was a baby. The pie band required patience. The exact point of the caramel bear connected attention, and the baking time did not absolve mistakes. Those recipes had become my conservancy and my livelihood. Sundays at the farmer's bazaar were my time for amusing interaction. Earlier women like me would arise to buy my sweets, and we would end up talking about our lives, our absent children, our adjourned dreams. Martha, a 72-year-old widow, became my acquaintance afterwards, either of us planning it. She too had been alone by her accouchement afterwards they married. She too knew the affliction of actuality airy to those who were already the centermost of your universe. Accouchement anticipate that already they form their own family, we parents know best matter. Martha would acquaint me as she bought 3 pies to booty to her neighbors. But aback they charge something, afresh they bethink we exist. How prophetic that chat had been. Now watching Eleanor arena her easily nervously, while Gregory mentally calculated the amount of my new life, I accepted altogether what Martha had meant. The change in Eleanor had been gradual but relentless. During the aboriginal few years of her marriage, she still alleged me occasionally, but the conversations became mechanical, abounding with awkward silences. Gregory was consistently present in the background, clearing his throat or authoritative comments that cut our talks like aciculate blades. "Your mom consistently has some drama," I heard him say already. Aback Eleanor anticipation she had afraid up the phone. "My mother never bothers us with her personal problems. Her claimed problems." That's how Gregory had classified my loneliness. My accustomed admiration to beforehand acquaintance with my alone daughter. My charge to be allotment of her new family. Aggregate I acquainted and bear had been reduced to claimed problems that abashed their absolute affiliated life. The ancestors' invitations began to arrive less frequently until they abolished completely. First, it was Thanksgiving dinner. This year will be article small, Mom. Aloof, the 4 of us. A fresh Christmas. The kids are sick. We'd bigger adjourn it. Afresh the birthdays. Aggregate got complicated with Gregory's work. Anniversary alibi was accompanied by alone promises about a budding time that never came. Eleanor developed a appropriate aptitude for authoritative every bounce. Complete reasonable. Every exclusion assumed temporary. Every abandonment feel as if it were for my own good. We don't appetite you to feel answerable to come, Mom. You're old enough to blow and adore your accord and quiet. My accord and quiet. As if loneliness were a allowance I had asked for. As if animate up every morning in a bashful accommodation was my abstraction of happiness. As if affable for one and bistro and advanced of the television was my analog of a abounding life. The years passed like pages of a agenda that no one read. My accepted became so anticipated that alike the mailman knew exactly what time I would be watering the plants on my babyish balcony. Monday, prepare angel pies. Tuesday, Jell-O salads of altered flavors. Wednesday, chocolate avoid cakes that awash like hot cakes. Thursday, muffins that ambrosial my absolute apartment. Friday, pumpkin aroma turnovers. Saturday, adapt aggregate for bizarre day. Sunday, the market, the ladies, the conversations that briefly abounding the alone in my chest. But there were also moments of such abstruse bareness that I anticipation I would asphyxiate in it. Entire nights awake, staring at the buzz that never rang. Cat and mouse for an argument that never arrived. Christmases celebrated with television specials and a babyish bogus Timberline that I busy by myself. New Year's Eve accustomed with a bottle of blood-warm sparkling wine, and the renewed achievement that maybe this would be the year of the reunion. The sharpest affliction came at abrupt moments aback I saw accomplished families at the park. Aback I heard added grandmother's allocution about their grandchildren. Aback I anesthetized by toy aliment, and wondered what mine would like. Eleanor had 3 accouchement whom I knew alone from. Bleared photos on amusing media that I checked from affected accounts like a spy on my own. Family, mom, Eleanor's. Articulation brought me back to the present. We apperceive we fabricated mistakes. Mistakes? The chat came out of my aperture like a bullet. Erasing your mother from your activity for 12 years was a mistake. Denying your accouchement the love of their grandmother was a mistake. Gregory abashed uncomfortably in his seat, assuredly compassionate that this chat was not activity to disentangle as he had planned. His eyes connected to scan my active room, calculating, evaluating, planning his abutting move like the able architect he had always been. They weren't mistakes, I continued. Activity, the accuracy cascade from my throat like hot bedrock afterwards years of being contained. They were conscious, calculated, atrocious decisions. You chose to abolish me from your lives as if I were an old allotment of appliance that was no best advantageous to you. Eleanor began to sob, but her tears no best had the adeptness to conciliate me as they already had. I had cried alone for 2 abounding nights. Apprehensive what I had done wrong, how I had bootless as a mother. Why my unconditional adulation had not been abundant to accumulate my ancestors together. Mom, please let us explain. Eleanor approved amid sobs. Explain what? My articulation rose without my actuality able to ascendancy it. Are you activity to explain to me why I didn't apperceive my granddaughter aback she took her first steps? Why I wasn't there aback my grandson absent his aboriginal tooth? Why I spent 12 Christmases affable for no one while you congenital ancestors' memories afterwards me? Gregory assuredly batten application that arrogant accent he had able over the years. Annabelle, we acquire that you feel hurt, but families sometimes need amplitude to grow. It was annihilation claim to join you. The beam that able my throat articulate so absinthian that even I was surprised. Annihilation personal, Gregory. You affronted my babe into a stranger. You buried adulteration in her amore join me. You absentively that I had no abode in the activity you were building. I remembered with aching accuracy the day Eleanor announced her final accommodation to me. It was a backing Tuesday in October, actually 12 years ago. She accustomed at my accommodation with an expression I had never apparent on her face before. Cold, distant, as if she were fulfilling an abhorrent obligation. Mom, Gregory and I acquire been talking. She began afterwards alike accepting the coffee I had able for her as always. We anticipate it's bigger if you acquire beneath acquaintance with us for a while. Beneath contact? I asked, activity the angel sway beneath my feet. What does that mean? It agency you are no best acceptable in our house. It agency we no best appetite you to alarm constantly. It agency we charge amplitude to be ancestors afterwards external interference. Alien interference. That's what my own babe had alleged me, as if I were a meddling neighbor, a drifter who interfered in affairs that did not affair her. Not her mother, who had carried her for 9 months in her womb, who had spent Hawkeye nights aback. She had a fever, who had formed double shifts to pay for her college. Eleanor, I don't acquire what I've done wrong, how I've bootless you. My articulation broke, but she remained impassive. It's not about what you've done wrong, Mom. It's about what's best for my alliance and my children. Gregory needs to apperceive that I put our nuclear ancestors aboriginal afore anyone else. Anyone else? That's what I was to my daughter. Anyone else? But Eleanor, I'm your mother. I'm your children's grandmother. I'm not a drifter who threatens your marriage. Gregory says that mothers-in-law always cause problems in adolescent marriages. He says it's bigger to authorize bright boundaries from the beginning. Gregory says, Gregory thinks, Gregory needs. At some point, my daughter's articulation had become an acknowledgement of his. Her thoughts had been replaced by his. Her amore had been reprogrammed to exhausted to the accent he set. And what about what you say, Eleanor? What about what you think? What about your heart? She remained silent for connected minutes, and for a moment I anticipation the babe I had aloft with so abundant adulation would acknowledgement to me. But when she spoke, her articulation articulate hollow, rehearsed, as if she were reciting curve from a play. I think Gregory is right. I anticipate it's for the best, for everyone, including you, Mom. You can acquire your own activity without worrying about us. That was the aftermost absolute chat we had. Afterwards that day, Eleanor became an apparition who occasionally beatific me cold, superficial text messages. Achievement, you're well, Mom. Blessed birthday. Blessed New Year. Automatic letters afterwards, soul. Afterwards, love. Like the ones that aggregation sends to its customers. The aboriginal few months afterwards that breakdown were the darkest of my life. I absent wait. I absent sleep. I lost hope. Every morning, I woke up acquisitive it was a nightmare. That Eleanor would alarm to apologize. That aggregate would go back to the way it was. But the buzz remained bashful and absoluteness grew heavier anniversary day. It was Martha who adored me from Bicon Cave actually into depression. She appeared at my aperture one Sunday morning aback I had been in bed for 3 canicule afterwards showering. Afterwards bistro added, then saltine, absurd, and iced tea. Annabelle, get up! You acquire 2 choices. You can break actuality dying in activity for a babe who doesn't deserve you, or you can anatomy a new activity that is aces of you. Her words articulate harsh, but they had the force of truth. That afternoon, she helped me apple pie my apartment, adapt my recipes, and plan my new ambrosia business. If your activity to suffer, she told me, as we exhausted the aboriginal accumulation of pie bushing in months, do it while you're accomplishing something productive. And so, my new activity began slowly, painfully, but with determination. Every pie I awash was a footfall toward emotional independence. Every annoyed chump was a babyish claimed victory. Every dollar I becoming was affidavit that I had value, alike if my own daughter didn't see it. Sundays at the bazaar became my account therapy. The ladies who bought my desserts became my new alleged family. We aggregate belief of careless children, of marriages that divided families, of the bareness of actuality, a mother in a association that discards you. Aback you are no best useful. My son tells me I'm too affecting aback I accuse that he doesn't visit. A adult alleged Joanna told me while aggravating my mango jello. But it's not drama. It's absolute pain. It's the basal animal charge to feel admired and admired by those you brought into the world. Now sitting in my active room, which cost added than aggregate Eleanor and Gregory endemic together, I remembered every tear, every Hawkeye night, every lonely birthday, and I saw them there, babyish and desperate, attractive for something from me afterwards accepting affronted their backs on me for added than a decade. So afterwards 12 years of silence, I said, with a controlled voice, what actually brings you to my door? Gregory and Eleanor exchanged a elusive look. Finally, he austere his throat again. Annabelle, the accuracy is, we're activity through a actual difficult time. A very difficult time. I afresh his words slowly, savoring the irony as if it were bitter honey. What an amazing accompaniment that you arise attractive for me aloof, aback you acquire problems. Afterwards 12 years of because my actuality extraneous to your absolute lives. Gregory abashed uncomfortably on the sofa, acutely advancing the accent he had apposite during the drive to my house. His eyes abhorred abundance as he formulated the words he anticipation would abate my heart. The architecture aggregation went bankrupt 6 months ago, he finally confessed. We absent all our savings. The abode is in foreclosure. Eleanor had to abdicate her job to booty care of the kids because we can't allow daycare. We're active with my parents, but they acquire banking problems too. Eleanor nodded desperately, as if acknowledging their accident would automatically accomplish my compassion. Mom, the kids ask why they don't acquire their own room, why Dad is consistently angry, why Mom cries at night. We don't apperceive what to do. Ah, I said, aptitude back in my Italian covering armchair. So now I'm useful. Now I exist. Now I'm allotment of the family. How convenient. During those 12 years of ostracism, I had developed the appropriate adeptness to apprehend amid the lines, to ascertain affecting manipulation, to assure myself from people who alone approach to back they bear something. The ladies at the bazaar had accomplished me that accouchement, often return to their parents. A back activity hits them, not out of 18-karat love, but out of accurate convenience. It's not like that, Mom, Eleanor protested, her voice breaking. I've consistently admired you. I've consistently anticipation of you. It was aloof that the affairs, the circumstances. I disconnected her with a smile that didn't adeptness my eyes. Let's allocution about circumstances, Eleanor. Aback, your Aboriginal son had pneumonia 8 years ago and was ailing for a week. Area was I? Aback, your additional son broke his arm arena soccer 5 years ago. Did you alarm me? Aback, your youngest daughter had problems at academy after most year. Did you anticipate to ask her grandmother for advice? Each catechism was an arrow aimed at the centermost of her guilt. Eleanor palled with each one because she knew the acknowledgement was the same. She hadn't anticipation of me at any difficult moment in their lives. Alone now, aback they bare money, aback their angel was crumbling financially. Had they remembered they had a mother? We knew you had banking problems, Gregory muttered, aggravating to absolve the unjustifiable. We didn't appetite to be a accountability to you, aback you could about abutment yourself affairs deserts. The audacity of his animate version larboard me aghast for a moment. Not alone had they justified my exclusion because of my poverty, but now they had the assumption to acquire it openly, as if it were a valid acumen to carelessness a admired one. I see, I said with a calmness that surprised me. So, I wasn't acceptable. Abundant for you, aback I was poor, but now that you apperceive about my new banking situation, I'm aback admired abundant to acquire a visit. The accuracy about my bread-and-butter transformation was article they couldn't imagine. 3 months ago, while preparing pies for the Sunday sale, I accustomed a alarm that afflicted my afterlife forever. It was an advocate from the city informing me of the afterlife of my Aunt Joan, my backward father's sister, who had lived in the United States for 50 years without our ancestors animate abundant about her. Aunt Joan had been the atramentous sheep of the family, the one who larboard adolescent in search of the American dream and never returned. For decades, we alone accustomed casual Christmas postcards, but we never actually knew how she had fared in life. It affronted out she had done abnormally well. The inheritance included a abode in Los Angeles that awash for $1.5 million, coffer accounts with addition $500,000, and several investments accretion addition $2 million. Overnight, I went from counting pennies to buy capacity for my desserts to accepting added money than I had any time dreamed of possessing. But the most important affair about that bequest wasn't the money. It was the letter Aunt Joan had larboard specifically for me. In that letter, she told me how she had followed my activity through amusing media, how she had apparent my loneliness, my family's abandonment, my circadian attempt to survive. She explained that she had absently to leave me aggregate, because she accustomed in me the same strong woman she had been, addition who had been underestimated and alone by her family, but who had never accustomed up. Annabelle, the letter said in the shaky handwriting of a 92-year-old woman. I acquire apparent how your babe has treated you. I acquire apparent your address and loneliness. This money is for you to animate your final years as the queen you always were, not as the beggar they capital you to be. With that inheritance, I bought this abode by the sea, a abode area I could death watch up every morning, alert to the after effects and breathing fresh air, chargeless from aching memories and baneful people. For the aboriginal time in 12 years, I slept in complete peace. Mom. Eleanor approved to access me, but I raised my duke to stop her. I apperceive we fabricated abhorrent mistakes. I apperceive we aching you in unforgivable ways, but we're family. Blood. Blood. I disconnected with the absinthian laugh. Eleanor. Blood means nothing afterwards respect, afterwards love, afterwards consideration. You affronted our family affiliation into a wet allotment of cardboard that you threw in the debris, aback at no best ill-fitted you. Gregory leaned forward, adopting an aspect of affected vulnerability that he had apparently accomplished in advance of the mirror. Annabelle, we acquire your pain, we acquire your anger, but the children are innocent in all of this. They don't deserve to ache for our mistakes. There it was, the agenda he had adored for last. The children, my unknown grandchildren, the best able affecting abetment they had in their arsenal. They knew that advertence the little ones could abate my heart, accustomed by years of neglect. "The children?" I asked. Activity, a admixture of affliction and acerbity activity in my chest. The same children who grew up afterwards animate they, had a grandmother who would acquire admired them unconditionally. The same children who were denied the love, wisdom, and affliction of their grandmother for all these years. Eleanor began to sob again. But this time her tears seemed genuine, abundant with the weight of absolute guilt. "Mom, we didn't anticipate about the abiding consequences. Gregory said it was bigger for the marriage, that mothers-in-law consistently acquired problems. Gregory said," I repeated, attractive anon at the man who had orchestrated the abolition of my accord with my daughter. Gregory thought. Gregory decided. "And Aria was your own voice, Eleanor? Aria was your own heart?" My articulation got absent about amid the promises of an absolute alliance and the abhorrence of contradicting my husband. Eleanor accepted with an bluntness that briefly disarmed me. "But Mom, now I realize aggregate we lost. The kids ask why they don't acquire a grandmother because they're a company allocution about their grandmothers and they don't apperceive any." Her words were acrimony beeline to the heart. But I had abstruse not to let affliction billow my judgment. For 12 years, I had fantasized about this moment, Eleanor's return, the accepting of her mistake, the adventitious to accommodated my grandchildren. But now that it was happening, I accomplished it was advancing too backward, and for the amiss reasons. "Do you know how abounding of my grandchildren's birthdays I absent, while you were architecture, your absolute ancestors afterwards alien interference?" I asked, my voice hardening with anniversary word. "Do you apperceive how abounding nights I backward animate apperception? What their voices, their laughs, their personalities would be like? Do you apperceive how abounding toys I bought and stored in a box, cat and mouse for a day that never came?" Gregory abashed nervously, acutely afflictive. With the administration the chat was taking, his plan of emotional abatement wasn't animate as he had hoped, and I could see him mentally artful his abutting artful move. "Annabelle, we acquire, you're hurt." He intervened with that arrogant articulation he had able over the years. "But now we can change all that. The accouchement can accommodate you. They can absorb time with you. We can be ancestors again." "A family?" I repeated, savoring the irony of his words. "You beggarly, the affectionate of family area, the grandmother is acceptable alone. Aback she has money to break the problems of capricious adults?" The house abounding with a close silence. Through the ample windows, I could see the ocean after effects breaking adjoin the rocks, a connected admonition of my new carelessness and my adamantine one independence. This abode represented aggregate I had achieved afterwards them, aggregate I had congenital from the ashes of my abandonment. During these 3 months active by the sea, I had developed an actually new routine. I woke up anniversary morning to the sound of seagulls, not to the bashful cry of loneliness. I able my coffee in a kitchen able with the best appliances. Not in the babyish amplitude area, I acclimated to calculation every penny for basic ingredients. I absolved forth the coffer at sunset, activity the bank amid my toes and the acrid wind in my hair, chargeless from the affecting depression I had carried for years. I had additionally started allowance added earlier women who, like me, had been abandoned by their families. Martha had abashed into an accommodation abreast my house, and calm we had created a small support accumulation for ladies in agnate situations. On Wednesday afternoons, we would gather in my active allowance to allotment stories, affecting adaptation strategies, and of course, my bootleg desserts. "Freedom," Martha had told me during one of those meetings, "is acumen that you don't charge the approval of those who aching you to be happy." Her words had resonated in my amore like an alarm of truth. For the first time in decades, I was active for myself. Not cat and mouse for calls that never came. Not affable for accouchement who didn't visit. Not absent of ancestors' reunions that existed alone in my imagination. Mom. Eleanor approached the bend of my armchair, her eyes red from crying. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I apperceive I don't deserve an additional chance. But I affirm on my accouchement that if you help us now, things will be different. I will be different." "Altered how?" I asked, befitting my articulation algid and controlled. Altered until you break your banking problems and don't need me anymore. Altered until Gregory decides afresh that I'm an arrest in his absolute marriage. Gregory stood up abruptly. Assuredly assuming his accurate attributes aback, he accomplished his abetment action wasn't working. Look, Annabelle, you acquire resentments, but the absoluteness is that we all accomplish mistakes in families. The important affair is to move on, not to get ashore in the past. His animadversion was like a bang in the face. Afterwards, 12 years of advised abandonment. He had the audacity to abbreviate my affliction as accepting ashore in the past, as if my suffering were an amusing best, rather than an absolute after-effect of their atrocious actions. Move on. I stood up from my armchair, activity all my address acceleration like an animate tower. Gregory, I have already abashed on. I congenital a new activity afterwards you. I begin accord afterwards your presence. I apparent my account without your validation. Eleanor covered her face with her hands. Bawl with an agony that would have burst my amore years ago. But the amore they had accepted had died slowly over 12 years of alienation, and had been reborn as article stronger, wiser, added careful with its love. You don't understand, do you? I continued, walking adjoin the window overlooking the ocean. You came here expecting to acquisition the aforementioned burst woman you alone 12 years ago. You accepted to acquisition addition so atrocious for family love that she would be accommodating to pay any amount for a few crumbs of affection. The accuracy was that during the aboriginal few years afterwards their abandonment, I would actually acquire been accommodating to pay any price. I would acquire mortgaged my anatomy for a buzz alarm from Eleanor. I would have a wash aggregate endemic for an afternoon with my grandchildren. I would acquire begged for absolution for offenses I never committed aloof to be allotment of their lives again. But time and affliction had taught me admired acquaint about heirs and claimed dignity. The afternoons with Martha and the added ladies had apparent me that ancestors' abandonment was added accepted than I thought, and that it was not alone accessible but could be the alpha of a added accurate and acceptable life. For years I abhorrent myself, I confessed, still attractive out at the ocean. I thought I had bootless as a mother, that I had been too meddlesome, too present, too loving. I bent myself, attractive for the exact moment I absent my daughter. I affronted to face them directly, and I could see how my words were affecting them in altered ways. Eleanor seemed actually devastated, as if she were finally compassionate the consequence of the accident they had caused. Gregory, on the added hand, showed signs of agitation and frustration, acutely artful whether it was worth continuing with this action, or if he should try an altered approach. But eventually I accepted the truth. I continued. I didn't lose my babe because of article I did wrong. I absent her because she chose a man who considered accepting a present mother-in-law a blackmail to his brittle masculinity. I absent her because she valued her husband's approval added than her mother's love. Eleanor stood up, swaying as if my words were concrete blows. Mom, it's not like that. I never stopped admiring you. I aloof got confused. Gregory fabricated me acquire it was for the best for everyone. Gregory manipulated you. I adapted her. But you accustomed him to do it. You chose to acquire his lies because they were added adequate than arresting your mother. You adopted the bogus accord of the authoritative alliance over the ache of ambience, advantageous boundaries with your husband. The blackout that followed my words was deafening. I could apprehend the active of the coffer clock, the distant sound of the waves, Eleanor's agitated breathing. Gregory had adopted that adamant aspect he acclimated aback he felt cornered, advancing to argue or to retreat strategically. So what do you appetite from us? Gregory assuredly asked. Abandoning any pretense of anguish or vulnerability, do you appetite us to gravel? Do you appetite to humiliate us as animus for the past? His catechism arise actually what I had accepted for him. It wasn't about acclimation affecting accident or rebuilding ancestors' relationships. It was a transaction, a negotiation area he accepted to pay the minimum amount all important to access the best banking benefit. I don't appetite your humiliation, Gregory, I replied with a calmness that afraid me. What I appetite is article you probably can't give. 18-carat respect, actual love, and the accepting that you spent 12 years treating me like I was garbage. Eleanor rose from the daybed with abashed movements, abutting me with her hands extended as if she capital to blow me, but didn't dare. Mom, I can accord you that. I do admit all the abuse we did to you. I've spent these aftermost few months awake at night, canonizing every atrocious moment, every alarm I didn't return, every allurement I never sent. These aftermost few months, I interrupted, noticing the specificity of her confession. What happened actually 3 months ago that made you bethink you had an alone mother? The blush drained from her face as if she had been bent in a lie. Gregory attempted her admonishing look, but it was too late. I had detected the aberration in her adventure of spontaneous repentance. Eleanor stammered, badly analytic for the right words. You begin out about my inheritance. I completed the book for her. Activity, all the pieces of the puzzle abatement all together into place. Addition told you about my new house, about my new banking situation. That's why you're here. Not for love, not for genuine remorse, but because you apparent that the mother you alone now has money. Gregory approved to take control of the bearings again, but his affectation of vulnerability had absurd completely. Annabelle, that's not true. Of course, we heard about your acceptable fortune, and were animated to apperceive your well, but we came. Why did you come? Because you're broke. I disconnected with the aloofness that cut like a blade. You came because you badly charge money and I am your aftermost resort. You came because you affected that 12 years of abandonment could be forgiven with a few well-acted tears and alone promises of reconciliation. The accuracy about how they had begun out about my new bearings had arised to me the anniversary afore through Martha. Her niece formed at the coffer area my bequest alteration had been handled and had overheard conversations about the adult who awash pies and now had millions of dollars. Gossip campaigned fast in babyish towns, abnormally aback it involved such affecting bread-and-butter transformations. It was Mr. Peterson from the bakery who told bisected the town. Martha had explained during one of our coffee afternoons. He says Eleanor and Gregory acquire been allurement about you. Absent. To apperceive if it's accurate, you got affluent overnight. That advice had been like a vaccine adjoin any adventurous achievement I adeptness acquire harbored for a 18-carat reunion. Aback I saw them arise at my door, I already knew actually why they were there and what they capital from me. Mom, yes, we found out about your inheritance, Eleanor assuredly admitted. Tears animate bottomward her cheeks. But that doesn't beggarly we're actuality aloof for the money. We're actuality because we fabricated the bigger aberration of our lives. You apprehend now? I asked, walking to the kitchen and cloudburst myself a bottle of air-conditioned water. You didn't apprehend during the 12 years I spent errant over your absence. You didn't apprehend aback I spent 3 afterwards Christmases in the hospital with pneumonia, because bareness had attenuated my accustomed system. You didn't apprehend aback I had to sell my Bell's adornment to pay for medication. Anniversary adumbration was a bomb that exploded in the close blackout of my active room. Eleanor knew annihilation about my illnesses, my banking crisis. The nights I had advised it would be easier to simply not death watch up the abutting day. To her, I had existed in a time bubble, arctic at the moment of her departure, patiently apprehension her closing return. We didn't know, Eleanor murmured, but her alibi articulate alveolate alike to herself. You didn't apperceive because you never asked. I adapted her. For 12 years you could acquire best up the buzz aloof already to find out how your mother was. You could acquire beatifica argument bulletin allurement if I bear anything. You could acquire stopped by my accommodation to assay if I was still alive. Gregory stood up abruptly, acutely balked that his plan of emotional abetment was not acquiescent the accepted results. All right, Annabelle, we get it. You're angry, but we're actuality now. We're actuality allurement for forgiveness, absent to fix things. Doesn't that calculation for something? His question arised the abyss of his confounding of the accident they had caused. For him, absolution was something that could be acquired by artlessly assuming up and apologizing, as if 12 years of affecting abandonment could be asleep with one afflictive conversation. What counts, Gregory, is the moment you decided to come. You didn't arise aback I bear you. You came aback you charge me. I absolved over to the window overlooking the backyard area I had buried red roses that were blooming beautifully under the literal sun. Those roses represented my rebirth, my adeptness to create adorableness alike afterwards actuality, pruned by those who were declared to affliction for me. For all these years I continued afterwards access to attending at them. I developed actual simple aesthetics about animal relationships. People appearance you who they actually are through their actions, not their words. You showed me that I had no amount in your lives. Aback things were activity, well. Eleanor came up abaft me, and I could feel her abashed attendance abreast my shoulder. Mom, we were young, stupid, influenced by a misaccount about alliance and family. But we've developed up. We've matured. You've gone broke. I corrected her afterwards axis around. You haven't matured. You've gone bankrupt. And now that you charge banking help, you suddenly remember you acquire a mother. The blackout that followed was burst by the complete of my phone. It was Martha apparently calling for our account agronomical session. I let it go to voicemail, but her alarm reminded me of article important. I had a abounding and acceptable activity without them. I had 18-carat friendships, purpose, accord of mind. I didn't need validation from bodies who had advised me like a disposable object. Do you know what the best aching moment of all these years was? I asked, assuredly anxious to face them. It wasn't when you chock-full agreeable me to celebrations. It wasn't a back you chock-full calling. It was a back I accomplished that I admired you unconditionally. But your adulation for me had altitude that you never acutely explained. Eleanor began to sob again, but this time, her tears assumed to arise from a deeper, added 18-carat place. Mom, I love you. I've consistently admired you. It's aloof that I let others convince me that adulation was ambiguous for my marriage. And now that your alliance is in a financial crisis, I observed, a back that adulation is no best problematic. How convenient. Gregory had remained silent for the aftermost few minutes, but I could see his apperception working, calculating, evaluating, attractive for a new bend of attack. He assuredly spoke, adopting an altered tone, added absolute and less manipulative. Look, Annabelle, let's be honest here. We charge banking help. You have money. We're family alike if we've had problems in the past. Isn't it accustomed for ancestors to advice anniversary added in difficult times? His barbarous bluntness was about auspicious afterwards so abundant poorly acted affecting manipulation. At Atomic Now we were speaking acutely about what they actually capital from me. It's interesting that you mentioned the abstraction of ancestors' allowance anniversary I replied with a smile that was anything but warm. Where was that ancestors' aesthetics aback I was animate 14-hour canicule affairs desserts to survive? Where was that ancestors' adherence aback I had to acquire amid affairs, anesthetic or food? Do you apperceive what's the best affecting affair about all this? I continued. Activity years of absolute pain transform into a apparent accuracy that cut like a scalpel. That if you had come a year ago aback I was still active in that tiny apartment, aback I was still counting bill to buy ingredients, I probably would acquire accustomed you with accessible arms. I would acquire cried with joy. I would acquire forgiven aggregate afterwards conditions. I would acquire adapted for you until I alone from exhaustion. Eleanor covered her face with her hands, her sobs now accompanied by an anatomy agitation that showed the consequence of her desperation. Gregory, on the added hand, had adopted an added close posture, like a cornered animal evaluating its escape options. But the money gave me article I never had during those 12 years of abandonment, I went on, walking boring through my active allowance like a judge delivering a sentence. It gave me perspective. It gave me the carelessness to choose who deserves to be in my activity and who doesn't. It gave me the adeptness to say no afterwards, abhorrence of the consequences. During my aboriginal few weeks active in this house, I had spent abounding hours absorption on this exact possibility. What would I do if Eleanor and Gregory appeared at my door? How would I react? Would I be able to beforehand my dignity? Or would I crumble at the aboriginal befalling to get my babe back? Martha had been my advisor during those abysmal reflections. Money doesn't change who you are on the inside, she had told me as we drank tea on my new terrace. But it does change how others see you and how you see yourself. The catechism is, are you activity to use that new angle to be wiser, or to accomplish the aforementioned affecting mistakes of the past? Her words had been prophetic. Now adverse the exact scenario we had discussed. I accomplished that the money had actually afflicted me, but not in the way Eleanor and Gregory expected. It hadn't fabricated me added acceptable with those who had aching me. It had fabricated me added careful with who adapted my time and my affecting energy. Mom. Eleanor approved to access me again. I acquire your anger. I acquire your pain. But don't you anticipate anybody deserves the additional chance? Don't you think ancestors' adulation can affected any accomplished mistake? A additional chance? I repeated, savoring the irony of her words. Eleanor, you had bags of opportunities over 12 years to rectify your mistake. Every day you woke up was in befalling to alarm your mother. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Mother's Day was in befalling to bethink that you had ancestors that admired you unconditionally. Gregory abashed restlessly, acutely artful whether he should arbitrate or let Eleanor abide with her strategy of affecting appeal. His eyes connected to browse my house, evaluating, calculating, apparently ciphering how abundant money he adeptness charged to break his problems, and how abundant they could ask me for afterwards appearing too greedy. The aberration amid an additional adventitious and a hundredth chance, I continued, is that second affairs are accustomed out of love. Hundredth affairs are accustomed out of desperation. You are not actuality for love. You are actuality for banking desperation. Eleanor angled to simulate the daybed as if my words had been concrete blows. You're right, she murmured in a burst voice. You're actually right. We are terrible hypocrites. We are selfish. We are aggregate, you say we are. Her acceptance of answerability adeptness acquire been effective. If it hadn't been accompanied by the accessible apprehension that acknowledging her mistakes would automatically after effect in my absolution, and added chiefly my banking help. Acknowledging your mistakes is alone the aboriginal step, Eleanor. I explained with the backbone of a abecedary explaining basic concepts to an apathetic student. The additional footfall is accepting the after effects of those mistakes. And the consequences of abandoning your mother for 12 years don't abandon just because you charge money now. I went to the kitchen and started authoritative coffee. Not because I capital to prolong this visit, but because I bear a moment to action the surrealism of the situation. After so abounding years absent of this reunion, the absoluteness was abundant colder, and added affected than I had imagined. While the coffee was brewing, I could apprehend burning whispers amid Eleanor and Gregory in the active room. I couldn't make out the exact words, but the accent was acutely one of action and negotiation. They were recalibrating their approach, attractive for new angles of manipulation. I alternate with a tray, absolute, a distinct cup of coffee. I sat in my admired armchair and drank slowly, celebratory them like a scientist belief specimens in a laboratory. Aren't you activity to action us coffee? Gregory asked, acutely affronted by my abridgment of acceptable hospitality. No, I replied simply. This is not an amusing visit. This is a negotiation, and in negotiations, accommodation implies according positions. We are not in equal positions. Eleanor seemed actually aching by my coldness, but Gregory showed an expression of afraid respect, as if he were assuredly compassionate that the woman in advance of him was not the same one they had alone 12 years ago. All right, Gregory said, adopting a more absolute tone. Let's allocution clearly. We charge $100,000 to save the abode and start over. We apperceive you acquire money. We apperceive we're family. What do you charge to hear to advise us? His catechism was so transactional, so bare of genuine emotion, that it about fabricated me laugh. He had bargained 12 years of family abandonment to a simple business negotiation. What abracadabra words did he charge to say to access my money? What I charge to hear, I replied afterwards, a connected sip of coffee, is the accuracy about why you actually afar me from your lives, not sugar-coated versions about active mistakes or alien influences. The absolute truth. Eleanor and Gregory exchanged cogent glances. It was bright they had able several versions of their story, but none had included the barbarous bluntness I was demanding. The truth, Eleanor murmured, is that Gregory asserted me that you were ambiguous for our marriage. Problematic how? I pressed, not acceptance her to adumbrate abaft euphemisms. Gregory took the floor, apparently acumen that Eleanor's victim action wasn't working. I anticipation you were too present, too opinionated. I anticipation you interfered in our decisions as a couple. Interfered how? I connected to press, determined to abstract the accomplished truth. You consistently had suggestions on how to accession the kids, on how to handle money, on area to live. Gregory accepted with an bluntness that apparently amount him physically. And Eleanor always listened to you. She consistently advised your assessment afore mine. There it was, the naked truth. Gregory had apparent my maternal access as a blackmail to his absolute ascendancy over Eleanor. He couldn't abide the abstraction of his wife having an antecedent of acumen and abutment absolute of him. So you alone me because I represented an alternative voice in Eleanor's life? I summarized. You alone me because my actual adulation for my daughter threatened your charge to be her sole antecedent of validation and direction. The blackout accepted my analysis. Eleanor assuredly aerial her head, her eyes reened, but with an announcement of belated understanding. Mom, now I acquire that Gregory was as wrong. I understand that I charge your articulation in my life. I acquire that I fabricated the bigger aberration of my actuality by choosing to amuse him over anniversary our relationship. Her words articulate genuine, but they came 12 years too backward, and in the amiss context. It was accessible to admit mistakes, aback the consequences of those mistakes were antibacterial you financially. You acquire now that you charge my voice in your life. I afresh her words slowly, but you accurately charge my voice to say yes to a accommodation of $100,000. Eleanor flinched at the surgical precision of my observation. Gregory, on the contrary, seemed affronted by my abnegation to acquire the narrative of attrition they had so anxiously constructed. "Annabelle, enough with the cerebral games," he assuredly exploded, assuming his accurate personality for the aboriginal time that afternoon. "We get it, you're angry, we get it. We fabricated mistakes, but we're here now. Allurement for help. Accommodating to accomplish amends. What added do you want?" His outburst was actually what I had been cat and mouse for. The moment the affectation of vulnerability would abatement actually, and reveal the controlling, artful man he had consistently been. The aforementioned man who had convinced Eleanor that a mother's adulation was a blackmail to her marriage. "What I want, Gregory, is article you will never be able to accord me," I replied with a calm that assorted badly with his agitation. "I appetite 12 years of my activity back. I appetite to acquire accepted my grandchildren aback they were babies. I appetite to acquire been present for their aboriginal steps, their aboriginal words, their aboriginal canicule of school." I got up from my armchair and, absolved to a bookshelf area, I kept the few ancestors' photographs I had adored from my previous life. I took one in particular, Eleanor at 5 years old, animated with no front teeth, adhering my leg with accurate admiration in her eyes. "This little girl loved me unconditionally," I said, assuming them the photograph. "This little babe alleged me her best friend, her hero, her admired actuality in the accomplished world. What happened to this little girl, Eleanor?" Eleanor looked at the photograph with an announcement of such acute affliction that for a moment I anticipation she would faint. "That little babe grew up and became a weak woman who accustomed an afraid man to abort the best admired affair she had in her life." Her acknowledgement afraid me with its barbarous honesty. It was the aboriginal time all afternoon that she had apparent absolute compassionate of the magnitude of what she had lost, not aloof what she bare to balance to break her accepted problems. "Exactly," I confirmed, returning the photograph to its place. "And now that anemic woman comes attractive for the mother she abandoned, not because she has begun her backbone and her absolute voice, but because she needs money." Gregory stood up abruptly, clearly balked with the administration of the conversation. "You apperceive what, Annabelle? Maybe you were appropriate from the beginning. Maybe you are too dramatic, too complicated. Maybe it was for the best that we got abroad from all this emotional drama." His words were like an abrupt gift. Afterwards, hours of careful manipulation, he had assuredly apparent his accurate nature, acknowledging aggregate I had suspected about him for years. "There he is," I said, animated actually for the first time all afternoon. "There is the absolute man, the man who convinced Eleanor that affectionate adulation was affecting drama, the man who couldn't tolerate his wife accepting an absolute antecedent of support." Eleanor looked at Gregory with a growing announcement of horror, as if she were assuredly seeing article that had been in advance of her for years, but that she had banned to acknowledge. "Gregory," she murmured in a trembling voice, "do you actually anticipate my mom is actuality affecting for actuality aching afterwards? We alone her for 12 years? "Eleanor, don't let her dispense you again," Gregory replied, adopting that paternalistic accent he had apparently acclimated to ascendancy her throughout their relationship. "She's arena with your affections to accomplish you feel guilty." "No," Eleanor said with a compactness she hadn't apparent all afternoon. "She's not arena with my emotions. She's cogent the accepted affliction that we caused her. She's actuality honest about the after effects of our abhorrent actions." I watched this barter with the absorption of a beholder watching a comedy I knew by heart. It was alluring to see how banking agony had amorphous to able the adeptness activating that Gregory had so anxiously congenital over the years. "Eleanor," I said softly, "airhead you apprehend that alike now, in this moment of crisis, your bedmate is added anxious with authoritative your acknowledgement, then with acclamation the accident they did to me." Eleanor affronted to attending at Gregory with new eyes, as if she were seeing a stranger. "You're right," she murmured. "Even now, he's added anxious with actuality appropriate than with accomplishing the appropriate thing." "Eleanor, don't get confused," Gregory insisted, but his articulation had absent the assured ascendancy it